The silence was almost louder than the distant wind that crept through the open windows of the apartment block. As a curious traveler, a thrill seeker in search of abandoned places, I thought I knew what I was getting myself into when I decided to explore Chernobyl. But standing before the towering ruin of an apartment building, an unsettling chill began to settle into my bones. Something wasn't right. The decaying concrete and broken glass, remnants of life interrupted, were to be expected. But it was the way the shadows played behind those shattered windows, forming shapes and figures that weren't quite natural. It was as if the building was watching me, waiting for me to step inside. The first floor was filled with the stench of damp and rot. Wallpapers peeled off, revealing the bare, stained concrete. I moved slowly, photographing remnants of lives left behind, trying to silence the nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I was not alone. As I reached the second floor, I felt a draft, even though the windows here were mostly intact. It was a strange sensation, like the caress of invisible fingers. My heart quickened as I turned the corner and saw a flicker in the window's reflection. I stopped dead in my tracks, eyes fixed on the window. There was a face, a human face staring back at me. It couldn't be. I was alone. Had to be alone. I mustered the courage to approach the window, telling myself it was just a reflection, a trick of the light. But as I drew nearer, the face remained, its eyes boring into mine, unblinking, unmoving. A feeling of dread washed over me, and my legs threatened to give way. I took a photograph, thinking that the logical proof would calm my nerves. When I looked at the image on my camera, there was nothing there, just the broken glass and the dark landscape beyond. I continued to explore, trying to shake off what I'd seen. Each room held echoes of the lives that had once filled them, frozen in time by the disaster. Children's toys, photographs, personal belongings, all left behind in the hurry to evacuate. The third floor was even more unsettling. I heard whispers, faint but distinct, like a conversation just out of earshot. I followed the sound, drawn to a room at the end of a dimly lit corridor. The door creaked open to reveal an empty room save for a tattered curtain that danced in the wind from another broken window. I felt eyes on me again and turned to see more faces in the windows, dozens of them, all staring, all silent. I ran, heart pounding, breath ragged, not daring to look back. The further I ventured into the building, the more intense the sensations became. Cold spots in hallways, distant cries, and the relentless feeling of being watched. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, the product of an overactive imagination fueled by the haunting setting. I reached the top floor, hoping for a view that might shake me from my growing terror. Instead, I found a room filled with personal belongings, as if someone had been living there recently. The room was neat, the bed made, clothes folded. A journal lay open on the desk, filled with sketches of faces, the faces from the windows. I picked up the journal, unable to resist reading. The writer spoke of being drawn to the building, of seeing the faces, hearing the whispers. They wrote of understanding the faces, of communicating with them, of becoming one with them. The final entry was unfinished, ending abruptly with a plea for help, a warning to leave, and a chilling revelation that the faces were the souls of those who died, trapped in the very walls of the building, seeking release. I dropped the journal, overwhelmed with a sense of impending doom. I stumbled out of the room, desperate to leave. But as I reached the staircase, I looked back one last time, and there in the window was my own face, staring back at me, eyes hollow, expression blank. I ran, not stopping until I was far from the apartment block. The faces, the whispers. The images haunt my dreams, the faces calling to me, beckoning me to return. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I catch a glimpse of a face in the window, my window, and I know that I left something behind in that building, something I can never retrieve. The faces are still there, waiting, watching. I don't know what they want. The Earth has places where silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's a tangible entity, an overbearing heaviness that engulfs you. Chernobyl is one such place. I had always been drawn to the mysteries of the world, and Ukraine's most haunting scar was my recent obsession. The idea of visiting a place frozen in time, its story paused mid-sentence by one of the worst nuclear disasters in history, was morbidly enticing. Friends, family, and even my rational self questioned my intent. Why risk it, they'd ask. But something unexplainable beckoned me. After days of paperwork and waiting, I found myself driving towards the exclusion zone. The decaying signboard reading Chernobyl greeted me, announcing the beginning of my journey into a ghostly past. The derelict town looked like the backdrop of a post-apocalyptic film. Decades-old remnants, cars, dolls, gas masks, a chilling tableau of halted lives. Buildings wore their erosion, nature claiming them back as trees and shrubs sprouted through cracks and crevices. However, it was the animals of Chernobyl that captured my attention in the most unsettling way. I first noticed it when a group of deer appeared on the road. Expecting them to bolt, I slowed my vehicle, but they just stood there. Not fearful, not curious, almost blank. As I passed them, their hollow gazes followed my car. Their eeriness was magnified by the lack of sound they made. The deeper I ventured, the more pronounced the phenomenon became. Birds, usually so animated and vocal, perched motionless on bare branches, their chirps conspicuously absent. Squirrels, instead of darting about, stared vacantly into the distance. Everywhere I looked, animals seemed frozen, their souls detached. Dusk approached, and the dying sunlight imbued the environment with a ghoulish gold. Finding a relatively stable spot, I decided to camp. Pitching my tent, I lit a small fire and sat, reflecting on the day's oddities. Suddenly, I was acutely aware of being watched. From the shadows, a pack of wild dogs emerged. Their approach was unhurried and silent, their movements almost fluid like wraiths. Their eyes bore into mine, devoid of life's sparkle. No barks, no growls, just that eerie, unbroken stillness. They formed a half circle around me, their expressions unreadable. I dared not move, not out of fear of being attacked, but rather the irrational dread that any action might shatter the delicate veil between reality and whatever realm I had unknowingly entered. Minutes felt like hours as the standoff continued. And then, from the midst of the silent watchers, an old canine, presumably the leader, stepped forward. His fur, grayed with age, bore patches where it seemed to have fallen off, revealing dark, scarred skin beneath. He came closer, his eyes searching mine, and in that fleeting moment, I felt an overwhelming connection, a mingling of souls. The ancient dog then lay down at my feet, his pack following suit. For a long while, we just sat there, an oddly assembled congregation, bound together by the haunting legacy of the land. The sun disappeared, giving way to a starlit night, but darkness did nothing to dispel the eeriness. In the depth of the night, I felt compelled to move. Leaving the fire and my belongings, guided by some inexplicable instinct, I walked. The animals, still as statues, seemed to guide me, watching from their frozen poses, silent sentinels in the night. Before long, I found myself at an old playground, its rusty swings and derelict slide painted in moonlight. At its center stood a corroded carousel, and atop one of its horses was a fox. Its stillness was unlike anything I'd ever seen, even amidst the oddities of the day. This fox was different. It had an aura of authority. As I approached, it shifted, a single movement that seemed to ripple through the very fabric of the surroundings. Suddenly, every animal in the vicinity turned towards us. The fox's eyes, unlike the others, burned with intelligence and, more disturbingly, pain. A deep, resonant howl emerged from its throat, echoing through the stillness. The sound resonated within me, stirring memories and emotions I couldn't quite grasp. Tears streamed down my face, though I wasn't sure why. The weight of centuries of anguish, regrets, and lost hopes seemed to press upon me. As dawn approached, the animals began to disperse, their silent forms melting away into the tree line, leaving me with that singular fox. As the first ray of sunlight touched its form, the fox began to fade, becoming translucent, and then, in the blink of an eye, disappearing altogether. Dazed and shaken, I made my way back to my campsite, packed up, and left Chernobyl with more questions than answers. The land, with its haunting landscapes and silent animals, had whispered secrets, ancient and profound, into my soul. I left changed, carrying with me a burden I couldn't articulate, a sense that there was more to the world than met the eye, and Chernobyl was but a window into that mysterious beyond. Now, as I recount my experience, I wonder, was it radiation that silenced the animals and made them so unnaturally still? Or was it something far older, a curse or a magic bound to the land and its history? Or perhaps, in my solitude, did I merely encounter the darkest corners of my own mind? To this day, the memories are vivid, the emotions raw, but every night, as sleep takes me, I hear that haunting howl of the fox, a siren's call, beckoning me back to the enigmatic land of Chernobyl's silent animals. I had heard the rumors, of course, but I never believed them. They say that in the shadows of Chernobyl's abandoned buildings, something lurked, something unnatural. It was the children's nursery in particular that drew my morbid curiosity, a place once filled with laughter and joy, now devoid of life. I decided I needed to see it for myself. Arriving at the exclusion zone, I felt a chill of anticipation. The guards at the entrance gave me wary looks as they examined my credentials. A freelance writer looking to pen a story on the lingering effects of a nuclear disaster seemed odd to them. My paperwork was in order, though, so they let me through. The drive through the ghost city was eerie. Buildings stood like tombstones, hollow and decaying. Nature had begun to reclaim the land, creeping over the roads and buildings like a green shroud. I parked my car near the nursery, and the instant I stepped out, I felt an inexplicable heaviness in the air. I stood before the nursery's entrance. Paint was peeling off the walls, and the windows were shattered, giving me a glimpse of what lay inside. I took a deep breath and stepped in. A musty smell filled my nostrils as I entered the dark, decaying building. My footsteps echoed ominously, and I could almost hear the faint cries of children long gone. I turned on my flashlight, and its beam cut through the darkness, revealing a corridor lined with doors leading to different rooms. I walked slowly, the silence amplifying every creak and groan of the ancient building. I came across a room with an open door, its darkness inviting yet intimidating. I stepped inside and my breath caught in my throat. Dolls. Scattered across the floor, their blank, lifeless eyes seemed to follow me as I moved. They were in different states of decay, some missing limbs, others with hair falling out. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I looked at one positioned on a chair. It seemed to have been placed there recently, unlike the others. I looked around, the hair on my neck standing on end. Was someone, or something, here before me? I began to examine the room more closely, taking notes, snapping pictures. Every so often, I'd glance at the doll on the chair, an unsettling feeling gnawing at me. As I moved towards the window, I noticed something odd. A journal, aged and worn, lay open on a dusty table. I picked it up, my hands trembling, and began to read. The entries were written by a nurse who worked at the nursery before the disaster. It told of strange occurrences, unexplained noises, children talking to unseen entities. The last entry was chilling. The nurse wrote about feeling watched, about objects moving on their own, about the dolls, especially the dolls. Her handwriting became more frantic, ending abruptly with the words, "They're watching, always watching." I put the journal down, my heart pounding. I felt a cold breeze and turned to look at the doll on the chair. It had moved. Its head was now tilted, eyes staring directly at me. I stumbled back, panic rising in my chest. I fumbled for my camera, desperately needing proof, but when I looked through the lens, the doll was back in its original position. Was my mind playing tricks on me? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. I left the nursery, the weight of what I'd seen pressing down on me. I drove away, but the image of the doll's lifeless eyes stayed with me. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to write my article, but the words wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the doll's face. I couldn't escape it. The nursery's haunting presence had latched onto me, refusing to let go. I found myself drawn back to Chernobyl, unable to resist its pull. The nursery called to me, whispering promises of answers. I returned to that room, but the doll was gone. Only an empty chair remained. I searched the entire building, but it was as if it had vanished into thin air. The mystery deepened and my obsession grew. I began to dig deeper, uncovering old records, speaking to former residents. The nursery had a dark history, one that stretched back long before the disaster. Stories of hauntings, of children seeing things that weren't there, of dolls moving on their own. My investigation took me down a path I couldn't return from, and the more I uncovered, the more questions I had. I became consumed, unable to focus on anything else. Friends and family grew concerned, but I couldn't stop. And then one day, I received a package. No return address, no note. Inside was the doll from the nursery, its blank, lifeless eyes staring up at me. I don't know how it found me or who sent it, but I know one thing for sure. They're watching. Always watching. Thank you for joining me on this chilling journey to the depths of Chernobyl. If this story sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more horror tales that will keep you up at night. Feel the chill of the unknown. Click on the video on your screen for more spine-tingling videos that will take you into the shadows of the supernatural. Do you have your own eerie encounters or terrifying tales to share? I want to hear from you. Leave your stories in the comments section below and let's uncover the mysteries that lurk in the dark together. Until next time, remember, they're watching, always watching. Stay scared, my friends.